right, Ben, welcome to the Founding AE podcast. I'm super excited to have you on today.
Hey, Justin, thanks for having me.
Well, I'm super excited about this conversation for a couple of different reasons. One being that you and I, in one respect, have very similar backgrounds. I was a founding AE that eventually became a founding product marketer, and I think I benefited significantly from being in both those roles. And I know you'll speak to sort of your experiences in both those roles. But I guess what differs between us is I've been mostly focused on SaaS and go-to-market tech, and you actually come from the space tech space, which I personally don't know much about, but have been always really, really fascinated with. So it'll be really, really interesting to dig into the learnings from both the space, but also those roles. But for those maybe that don't know you and are listening in, why don't you give a little bit of introduction, a little bit about your background, and then we can dive into the fun stuff with the founding AE topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So like you mentioned, I've been working in space technology just the last 6 years, and it's really where I started actually coming into the industry with a bit of a technical background. But through learning about the technologies and its applications, there were just so many curiosities I had in terms of what customers could actually do with this in terms of a commercial sense. Space technology for the longest time has been something that's been used for a lot of government or research purposes. And as we've seen so much innovation unfold in the commercial space industry, suddenly there's a lot more opportunities to commercialize it. So that really prompted me getting involved, and I jumped in as a founding account executive for a space technology company here in Canada called Skywatch a number of years ago. That was really my foray into blending sales with the industry, space technology. And like you mentioned, there's certainly a few differences, but also a lot of similarities and parallels between SaaS and space tech that I'm looking forward to chatting with you today.
Well, let's talk about that. I'm curious. Very familiar with obviously the SaaS motion, and I think there are a lot of playbooks and things out there around that. Tell us about that space tech. Like how does GTM look in that motion? Are there resources out there, or sort of are you creating it as you go? Would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, since there's so much new components to commercializing space technology now, I would certainly say that it's still in its early days. But one of the things that I'll share in terms of one of those kind of differing components is in terms of getting technology into space, there is obviously a enormous challenge in terms of like overcoming physics and actually getting the technology into space so that it can operate appropriately and we can collect the data we need to bring it back down to Earth and actually use it for real world Earth-based applications. So that's certainly one kind of initial barrier that at least maybe prevents any of those initial go-to-market motions from taking off immediately. If you think about launching a SaaS product, once it's built, the digital platform or digital product itself, the time to start that go-to-market actually happens relatively fast. But with space, there can be a number of lag periods, a couple of years between when the technology is in its research and development phase to when it's actually physically launched into space, and then when it's actually ready to begin commercialization. So certainly a bit more of a longer time horizon to actually get to that initial go-to-market stage. But ultimately, you're still serving customers with business challenges here on Earth. So when it comes to the actual go-to-market strategies, you still need a very specific ideal customer profile. Your positioning and your messaging needs to be the same, or at least similar in terms of speaking to a very specific audience. So that's probably where I'd say some of those similarities are between SaaS and space tech, but keeping in mind overcoming physics and definitely a higher level of capital intensity to make that all happen are some of the big differentiators between SaaS and space tech.
That's super interesting. I'm curious on the ideal customer profile part. SaaS is obviously such a broad space, right? You could be selling any type of SaaS software. You can be selling to salespeople, health tech or healthcare professionals, and so on. Is it easier to choose an ICP when it comes to space tech because there's maybe a smaller set of people that are utilizing that technology, or is it harder because I guess it's unknown, right? And there's new stuff coming out all the time, new applications to it.
Traditionally speaking, I would say yes. Many years ago, most of the markets and audiences that you would be selling to would be institutional buyers, most likely affiliated with governments, so local or national governments. And that ideal customer profile was fairly set in stone. But with the rise of commercial and really new space, suddenly that commercial profile envelope opens, and there are many other commercial customers you may look to target. But I'll share maybe a few similarities or trends that we've seen, and some patterns for those that I would consider to be early adopters. They would be customers working close to natural resources, or they may have a large geographic footprint. So much of space technology is based in enabling large scale solutions that cover large geographies. So large industries that operate over large geographies are going to be the ones that most likely need these space-based solutions the fastest. And they probably already have the existing digital infrastructure to be able to absorb a lot of the data, the geospatial data, the Earth imaging data, and all of the data products and analytics and everything that we're providing to them to help them out. So those are some of the patterns and signals that we've looked for in the commercial industry for those that are considered early adopters.
And that's super interesting. And how about in terms of the push and pull? And what I mean by that is, like, I feel like in SaaS, right? If I'm struggling with prospecting or I'm struggling with follow-up, right? I'm gonna go and look for a solution out there. I'm pretty sure there must be some sort of SaaS that's focused on it. When in the space tech space, do you find that there's awareness that, oh, there's probably solutions available, space tech solutions that can help me solve this problem? Or is it much more of a push where you're trying to educate the market that even these solutions exist in the first place?
Certainly more of a push. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is a lot of the applications that we're bringing to market are supported by data sources that are relatively new, that, for example, have only been available in the last 1 to 2 years, because the physical satellite that literally collects the data itself was just launched in the last couple of years. And what that means is that with everything being new, there's a huge education piece, like you said, as we go to market, and certainly a push. And anytime that we can provide value or package it in a way that is easy to digest for these various customer segments, I think it goes a long way to show that we're really ready to help and support and enable them in their digital adoption as they look at new space-based solutions.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I feel like there's this debate always in SaaS between, like, category creation and, like, sort of joining an existing category. It feels like in space tech, it's all category creation. I mean, these problems exist, right? But the category and the solutions are all brand new. So there's no debate there. You're creating a category, and that's both exciting but challenging. And maybe a good segue into sort of your background, which I think is so fascinating, that you started in early stage sales and then you went into product marketing. And I've always felt like, uh, when I was an early stage salesperson, when I was a founding AE, I think a lot of the things that made me successful were traits that actually ended up making me successful as a product marketer, right? It was going beyond the action of cold calling and demoing and following up and closing deals to actually thinking about, like, who is our ICP? What is the problem that they have? Like, is it an urgent and important problem? And how do we position our solution in a way where it captures their attention and tells a story that resonates with them? So maybe tell me a little bit about your perspective on that. You went through that journey. How do you think about those two roles, the connection between those two roles? Maybe if there are founding AEs listening to this that have thought about branching out and getting into product marketing, like, what are some things that they should think about?
Yeah, it's such a good point. And similar to the experiences that you just went through, I would certainly agree. I think at the time when I was founding AE, I actually didn't maybe have a full concept of a product marketing career path. And it wasn't actually till a few years later, through some industry mentorship, that it steered me in that direction. And I believe that initially, as I was going through the founding AE motions, and you get so close to customers, you start to see those patterns and you know what resonates with them. And in a product marketing lens, you bring all of those skills, but you apply it almost in like a one-to-many
Yeah.
type of working environment, right? Where you start to scale all of those learnings up and find ways to drive efficiencies at many different stages of the sales pipeline, the funnel, etc. And it really felt like a natural progression. And maybe something else I would say to that as well is, with all those learnings you gain as a founding AE and from a product marketing perspective, you really are the source of market intelligence. And I see that as an essential component, as a feedback loop between how the business learns about the market and how the market also learns about the business, and how those eventually come together, which we of course call product market fit. And that feedback loop is just so important. And as a founding AE, you are really driving that feedback loop at the beginning. And as a product marketer, you are continuing to reinforce that feedback loop, not just in terms of sales touch points, but across your website and all of your other channels that you're speaking to customers through.
Yeah, I actually got into product marketing in somewhat of a similar way, where it wasn't something I did out of my own choice or my own sort of like doing. I was at a company where I was the founding AE, and I had gone through founding AE to building out a sales development team to the founder CEO positioning the product marketing role for me. And the first thing I said was like, I don't even know what product marketing is. Like, what would I be doing? And the way he positioned it was exactly what you said, which was like, you know, what you did as a founding AE one to one, you'd be doing that one to many. And both in terms of pushing the message out to the market, you used to sell directly to an individual person. Now you're selling to an entire category or market of people. And then also how you, as a founding AE, took those insights from your conversations and shared it with the product team. You're going to be taking insights from the market and sharing it with the product team. So I totally like, it resonates with me the way that you sort of explained the connection between those two roles.
Mm-hmm. And maybe something else that you may have experienced, and I certainly felt this too, you can really empathize with what other sellers are going through or have gone
Yeah.
through before, because you have done the roles. You understand the pains of when product market fit is still in its early stages and you're still figuring that out. And I think that actually is a huge superpower for product marketers, because
Totally.
those that have done the selling before can anticipate the needs and step in at the right time to help.
Yeah, and you come from a place of credibility. You've done it, right? You've carried the bag. You know the pain points, the challenges, so you can speak from a place of authority. Talking about the challenges of the early stage sales role, and playbooks, right, or motions, especially to get those early adopters when you're starting a new category, like you've experienced, right? Again, in SaaS, there are tons of playbooks out there on how to like go about creating a category, or like go to market motions, outbound tools and assets that you need and all that stuff. What what does it look like in space tech? Is there a playbook? Are there tools? Do you use SaaS as the playbook, even though you're applying it to a different space, or is it a completely different ball game that you're playing?
Mm-hmm. It's probably worth mentioning at this point too, just to break down the space tech industry a little bit, just to provide some clarity to those that are listening. There are a few different categories. If we think about like the manufacturing of all the hardware that goes into space, that's kind of its own category. You've got launch services, so getting things to space, satellite and space operations, and then eventually you get into products and applications. And this starts to sit closer to your end customers here on Earth. And I think that's probably where I could speak to in terms of some of those playbooks and all those components. What are some of those digital products that are being provided to customers? How are we actually building up those playbooks? And in so many cases, like I had mentioned before, with new data, new technology, and that education piece, there is a huge component and a huge need for demonstrating value and building really credible demos that show real world applications that actually are linked back to business cases and things that actually move the needle. And actually building those out, there are a few different ways that companies have traditionally gone about doing that. Sometimes they'll build their own internal demos, like SaaS companies would typically do, but other times they're building them with early adopting customers too. And there's a really unique partnership model within space tech where typically companies will specialize and they may focus on just providing the data, and they may partner with an analytics company, and together they collectively are like creating a demo that they're then taking to market together. And what I would certainly say to that is that is the learning and iterative process that takes place, where first and foremost, get a sense of which customers are coming to you, that they're the ones that are really fast to adopt. They want to integrate data into their products and they want to be able to bring it to market. Really understand what that core business case is, what the numbers are, and then be able to find ways to then speak to that particular business case kind of across all of your different channels. I think that is a really important step that needs to take in order actually to really validate whether your early adopters are a repeatable growth segment that you can double down on. And I think that's kind of where you start to see those playbooks starting to develop.
Yeah, I think there's some learnings there, in fact, that like us in SaaS can take, right? Where, because there's so many products in the market and it's not always category creation. Sometimes we forget about the business case or the ROI, and it's like people lean into like features and capabilities and side by side comparisons between you and your competitor. But in the end of the day, whether you're in space tech or you're in SaaS, your customer's trying to solve a problem, and their need for social proof and seeing the path to impact is consistent, right? So having some emphasis on that, I think, even in SaaS, right? I think is a really really great learning to take from that space. I'd assume as well in space tech, and again, I know you mentioned there's different categories of space tech, but I'd assume in most of those categories, consistently your founders probably relatively technical, right? And we know that there are unique challenges for early stage go to market professionals in working with technical founders. There are unique challenges in working with non-technical founders as well. But in technical founders, a lot of it has to do with, helping them understand the value of go to market and the process of go to market. I'm curious what that looked like in your experience working with technical founders in space tech. Like, how did you collaborate with them? How did you educate them on the importance of go to market, on the motions that are needed, the resources, maybe the budget that is needed for it? Curious what that looked like for you.
And there's definitely a complementary skill set between the two domains in terms of go to market and the technical founders, where in experience, technical founders have focused on really leading the product vision and building it and really getting that first iteration to market, but then also continuing to build future iterations. And this could be hardware or software or a combination of both, where founding go-to-market teams really validate and sell that initial or immediate version iteration of wherever the product is at today. And then, of course, provide the ongoing feedback. And where those teams have worked really well together is sharing that tight feedback loop. And I think that's something that's so important to build collaboratively between both sides of the business. I'd also say another extension of that is sharing in customer engagements and having go-to-market teams lead those discussions, but bringing in the technical founders and technical team members so that both sides of the business can learn together in real time. And I think that really compounds all of the learnings that the go-to-market teams continue to collect on their own. And then all of this, as it comes together, I think it starts to build a very repeatable pattern for determining what success looks like, efficiencies, etc. And when that model exists and when it works really well.
Yeah. In go to market, right, and especially in SaaS, there's a lot of talk about like sales cycles and the differences between, let's say PLG products where sales cycles might be short, or enterprise products where sales cycles might be longer. I'm assuming in space tech, and again, even thinking across the various categories, sales cycles got to be pretty long, right? And one of the challenges with long sales cycles is keeping momentum going, right? And we're talking here about, you're talking about, I mean, you mentioned, it could take a long time for that product even to go to market, right? How have you kept the attention of your target audience, and kept momentum going in these long sales cycles that perhaps somebody in SaaS that isn't dealing with the extreme that you are in space tech, but maybe is trying to learn from that and apply it to what seems to you like a shorter sales cycle, but to them a long one. Keeping the momentum going, keeping that interest going through the longer sales cycles.
There are a lot of similarities, I would say, between like enterprise SaaS selling and sales cycles in space tech. And I think actually both both domains can continue to learn from each other. And it's probably a great continuing opportunity maybe to discuss later. But at a high level, what I would say is where longer sales cycles exist, continuing to provide value to the champion that you're engaged with as you're building up a champion and really enabling them to continue to provide value into their business, anticipating their needs. That is something that has certainly been very beneficial, where both sides recognize that there's a longer process ahead. And I think just continuing to show up by anticipating needs and just being proactive, I think really goes a long way to build that level of trust that is ultimately needed to make a lot of these partnerships successful. In addition, I would also say where you can, introducing your various executive teams to each other and doing so early in the process, just to get them talking to one another to build rapport. And I think we see a lot of similarities with enterprise selling and SaaS in this particular case, where if you are the account executive or you are the lead go-to-market team member that's working with an account, you'll continue to work with the champions and operators in the deal while having the executives build that relationship and that rapport. And that, I would say, again, is just so similar between enterprise selling and SpaceTech. The only real difference here, sometimes those sales cycles are just quite a bit longer.
Yeah, I totally learnings that I think cross those industries. Another area that maybe we're dealing with a little bit more recently in SaaS that I'm assuming you've dealt with for a long time is this need to future-proof your go-to-market. And I've seen you talk about it on LinkedIn. And it had me thinking, okay, like SpaceTech, future-proofing is got to be part of the go-to-market strategy, right? Because there's, like you said, there's new technology coming out all the time that just is all category creating and game changing. So you have to make sure that your go-to-market strategies and motions stand the test of time. In SaaS, I think we've been fortunate where the go-to-market motions we've been using have worked and stayed relatively consistent for the last decade or two. Suddenly now we've got AI in the mix and a lot of new things that we have to consider and think about in our go-to-market motions. So you talked about future-proofing. How do you think about that? How do you build that into your strategy? What are some tactics or approaches that people should be thinking about today to future-proof their go-to-market motion in a world that isn't quite clear and visible to us yet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are certainly some nuances, even just related to SpaceTech specific as well, where there are regulations that we have to abide by, and sometimes it means we can't always be sharing information as upfront as you would see with a SaaS company that may be able to provide a lot of information on their landing page and have a click-through sign up. There's a bit of a due diligence we have to go through with vetting customers, but there is a continuous narrative about what a modern digital first customer experience is like for learning about products and adopting products. And I would certainly say that there are some parallels between SpaceTech and SaaS as it relates to that. And just from conversations that I've even had in like the last few months, we've continued to see continuous increases in automation and automation opportunities for outreach, demand generation, etc. And I certainly would say that there's a valid opportunity for those technologies in go-to-market moving forward. But I think really to future-proof, I think it really is to remember not to skip on the basics and to prioritize really mastering those basics first. And I think the translation here is great product marketing. Ensure you have great product marketing first before you start taking on additional layers of complexity. And really what that means is continue to understand your customer and their world as well as they do, if not better, first and foremost. The second is understanding what jobs they're struggling with, and then really position your product, the messaging, right, all your channels to guide them towards an easy adoption of solution, and just find those technologies that then just make that easier. And once you incorporate those plus your feedback loops, I really think that's the foundation for future-proofing your go-to-market. And at that point, you can look to add or remove any new technologies as you see fit.
Yeah, I think the biggest risk that I see out there to people automating their go-to-market motions is that they forget those fundamentals, that in the end of the day, you're selling to people, and these people are facing problems, jobs, tasks that they're struggling with, and figuring out how to solve those problems and how to speak to how you solve those problems and demonstrate how you solve those problems to similar people, for similar people. That is still the fundamentals, and automation without that is not going to work, right? So that's a really, really valid point. Just rounding out the conversation today, we tend to have a lot of new founding AEs listening in, or people that are just interested in potentially making that leap, right? Maybe they're working at a larger company, maybe they're working in a different role outside of sales, and they're interested in joining a startup as a founding AE. Thinking back through your career, both in as a founding AE and then as you've been in product marketing as well, what are what's some advice you'd have for them? What maybe some mistakes or lessons that you've learned that you would share with them to maybe set them on the right path?
Hmm. Um, I would say first and foremost to take an objective approach to all of your sales interactions and really your role as a whole. Whether or not the outcomes and actions and setbacks you experience lead you towards success as it's defined immediately in the role. Your role will always change and grow. And if you look at it as collecting data points, that is how you'll be able to determine who exactly your product is for and who it isn't. And I think that goes a long way to actually beginning to shape your understanding of the market and how you can increase your level of success faster. So keeping an objective approach, I think, goes a long way, and really focus on building good quality market intelligence that you can share with your team, as that will also help your team be able to help you more effectively as well. And if you do that, I think that you would have a great kickoff to a founding AE career.
Yeah, and I think there's actually an interesting mental side to this too, right? Where the founding AE role can be challenging. It can be mentally taxing if you're getting rejections and you're hitting walls constantly. But thinking about it objectively, as you said, as data points, hitting a wall, hitting a barrier, an objection is not failure, but it's a learning on where you should go next, is actually not just the right thing to do, I think, to push forward, but also mentally the way to deal with those setbacks, and to think about it actually as a positive thing, right? Like it's a light turning on, showing you actually the right way to go. So Ben, this was awesome, man. I was really excited about this. Again, both your product marketing and your AE background, but also learning more about SpaceTech. And I've learned that there's a lot of things that we can take from that space and apply to SaaS that will be really, really valuable. If folks are listening to this and they want to chat with you, they want to learn more about your experience, they want to learn more about SpaceTech, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, reach out to me through LinkedIn. I'm really curious. Actually, this conversation has really sparked my curiosity to learn more about different aspects of SaaS and where SaaS sellers might be winning or where they might be struggling, and where SpaceTech might align to either help, or maybe there are some things I can learn from you as well. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Ben, this was so fun. Thanks again for your time today, and have a great day over there.
Yeah, thanks, Justin.